Our first unmotivated camera movement, and probably our most familiar, is the slow push-in. This move happens all the time. We even talked at some length about it back in our original Brilliant Moments breakdown. But the slow push-in is a perfect first example of the camera's voice being heard. It's not reframing, just creeping slightly closer. It doesn't just say look, it says look harder. There's something below the surface. There's more than meets the eye. It knows how we would read a shot statically and then asks us to consider it with just a little more importance. And for a brilliant example, check out this twofer from the beginning of the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
You heard word one about the wife of the Confederacies, Jefferson Davis, didn't you?
I didn't.
No, you didn't. He did his duty by her.
Huh?
Oh my God, I'm speaking to children.
No, I get it.
The President of the Confederacy would discern his wife's needs and satisfy them.
At this point in the film, we've seen nothing more than a brief biography of Jesse James. We don't even know who Casey Affleck's character is. And yet, without even a word, we know everything about what's happening here because of how it's shot. Here, try it one more time with the push-in removed.
He did his duty by her.
Huh?
Oh my God, I'm speaking to children.
No, I get it.
Less meaningful, right? This push-in says something important is stewing inside this man's head, while this one says narrow your focus, this is more than a group of men, look closer at the one in the middle. But put them together and they become more than the sum of their parts. The dual push-ins connect the meaning just as they're connected in motion. And what comes out of that alchemy is a sense that there's a special moment happening between the man with the gaze and the object of his gaze. Some kind of special longing or interest or desire that Casey Affleck feels towards the man in the middle of this frame, all without a word of exposition, just simple camera talk. Next up in color palettes, slightly less limited than the selective saturation, is the monochrome palette. And it's pretty simple. As far as colors go, you just get one. Sure, maybe you deviate in brightness or saturation a little bit, but you pick a spot on the color wheel and stick with it. It's used by design in Buried, naturalistically in Kieslowski's Three Colors trilogy. Intolerance used revolutionary monochromatic tinting to separate out its timelines, while Hero is probably the most iconic and readily accessible example of this over and over and in every different way. But we've picked it enough times on our lists that we're going to keep looking. In its place, we're making room for a film we don't talk enough about. Citizen Kane. No, I'm just kidding. I couldn't even finish it. Our number 7 slot is actually going to Cries and Whispers.
Klädd I sin vita klänning, alldeles orörlig med huvudet böjt och händerna vilande mot bordet. Plötsligt upptäckte hon mig.
Now, our last few slots have gone to films leveraging the digital intermediate technology of the 2000s, but good color has been around long before the turn of the millennium. You see, before colorists had digital trickery, production designers and cinematographers controlled color the old-fashioned way, through meticulous design. Films can follow just as strict a palette by carefully selecting and coordinating the costuming, location choices, set design, makeup, and lighting. And Cries and Whispers does just that. Beyond a few relieving scenes of green and yellow, everything in Cries and Whispers takes place in a world that is blood red. Bergman famously said, "All of my films can be thought of in terms of black and white except Cries and Whispers," and you can see why. The overwhelming pervasiveness of the crimson has such a moving effect, like a sensory deprivation tank of color, that you can't help but be emotionally moved.